Our text for this Sunday, the 28th of September, the text I will be using is from Matthew's Gospel, the 21st chapter, the 23rd to the 32nd verse. And just to set the context, this is the day following Jesus' cleansing of the temple. When he entered the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question, and if you tell me the answer, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. "If we say from heaven, then he will say to us, 'Why then did you not believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd, for they all regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." "What do you think?" Jesus said. "A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work at the vineyard today.' And he answered, 'I will not.' But later changed his mind and went. The other, then he went to the other son, and he said the same thing. And he answered, 'I will go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of the Father?" They said, "Well, the first." Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him, and even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him." The word of the Lord. Today's gospel from Matthew reveals some fascinating contrasts and conflicts. In this text you just heard, we find religious authorities in a face-off with Jesus, really a conflict over the exercise of authority. They ask, "By what authority are you doing these things? And then, who gave you that authority?" This is an ancient question, isn't it? But even these days, you and I hear it raised. We hear questions about authority and management style. We hear one branch of government suing another over the exercise of authority. We fear that one group will gain political authority as they grow in influence and numbers. Today, the chief priests and elders are asking not only about the external authority Jesus claims, especially in the light of his previous behavior in the temple, but they also question his personal, interior authority. Then Jesus places a question to them, a question that reveals the contrast, the debate, and the differences among them. A question that also deals with the authority and the source of John's message and John's actions. And Jesus' question is linking on some level his own message with the actions of John's ministry. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin? The religious leaders were trapped by the question, and they found that they could not answer. Why? Any answer put their own authority at risk, as well as their relationship with the common people, ordinary people who on some level they controlled, but who on another level were greatly impacted by John's gifts and message and charism. Then this encounter with the religious leaders is followed by a story about two sons and how they responded to their father's request, their father's authority. Some scholars call this a parable, others do not. But I've often wondered about these two sons. What was their relationship with their father and their relationship with one another? Were they close siblings, competitive, respectful of one another and their father? This story reminds me of the two sons in Luke's parable. One left with his inheritance, but changed his mind in return, being very repentant. One stayed at home and failed to change his heart. Both sons disrespected their father's authority. The words of Paul's letter to the Philippians, in light of this gospel, take on new meaning. Let each one of you look not to your own interests, but to the interest of others. It seems that the religious leaders and the father's sons were on some level looking out for their own interests. Now, there's so many questions you and I could ask of this gospel parable. Did the father first ask the elder son or younger son to work in the vineyard? We know the elder son held a very special place in the family. But the text says he went to the first and said. First could mean many things. Did the second son know what his brothers said and did? Did he think he would take a different approach with his father, maybe outshine his brother's response? Did the father in this story face deep shame by both sons? Like the father in the prodigal son parable, a child demanding his inheritance before the death of a parent, and the hardness of heart shown by the eldest son. You and I are very aware of family and sibling conflicts that arise over caregiving, money, relationships, inheritance, property, politics. You and I are also very aware of the misuse of authority. We're very aware of theological conflicts like those we hear today in Matthew's Gospel. Conflicts over gifts given, messages that attract, and new forms of leadership and, yes, authority. Each of our denominations deals with such disputes regarding leadership, gifts, community perceptions, similar to the religious leaders of Jesus' day. We might ask, how do we handle gifted people who exercise authority and leadership outside of traditional lines? How do we accept people's gifts that may not have been accepted in the past? I am presuming the very same audience mentioned in the opening of the gospel is also listening to today's parable, the temple leadership. At this time, their answer to Jesus' question is correct. The one who first refused and changed his mind and went into the field did his father's will. But their correct answer this time trapped them, because Jesus related this parable to those who accepted John and those who did not. It came full circle. He showed them the answer they should have given regarding John. Now, while this short parable does not contain what we call a parabolic surprise, the end of the story reveals a surprise about the message of Jesus Christ. He seems to be saying that the margins are the new center. The outcast, the unclean, distrusted, those who seem to lack standing, power, money, status, appear to have hearts that are open and are willing to change. The question for us is this: how well are you and I doing in our response to God's apparent calls and the overwhelming needs of the margins around us? Does it seem that our culture, which often calls itself Christian, has lost its focus and its compass? Jesus' closing remarks today are powerful. The tax collectors and the prostitutes believed John, and even after you religious leaders saw it, you did not believe him. We often seem to forget that hearts can change, that greed has so much control, and the one in whose name we enter the vineyard has a preferential love and care for those often ignored, blamed, and victimized. What have you and I come to know? What have you and I seen and yet refuse to accept, to budge, or to believe? A question that might be wise for all of us to ask ourselves from time to time as we struggle with conflicts, division, change, and the authority all around.